Welcome to Maidens and Magic. Hello, witches. You are down with me, Anarchy. This is Maidens and Magic, and I'm coming at you after a little minute. It's been a minute, and I have to say, I've really missed you, and I've missed doing this. I ended up taking a very abrupt, unplanned hiatus and I was back in Seattle for a little while, and I think probably most of you who listen to this follow me on Facebook and have some idea what was going on in my life. It was chaotic there for a moment, but things are settling down and I'm super happy to be here. I have, of course, a new episode for you, and I got here because I actually kind of keep teasing around Buddhism. And there are three main types of Buddhism that I want to delve into, but one of those is Tibetan Buddhism. And so I thought, what a fun way to get to Tibetan Buddhism. I'm actually going to do Twin Peaks Season 1, Episode 2. It's sometimes called Zen or the Skill to Catch a Killer. This is a fan-fucking-tastic episode because the pilot, and I mentioned this, I do have Fire Walk With Me, the movie, also on Maidens and Magic. If you want to check that out, it's in the archives. It's not an archive, it's just YouTube. It's my channel. You can go there and watch anything you want. No big whoop. Oh my. At any rate, as mentioned there, the pilot and Episode 1, there's no real magic there if you're watching the US standard version. It really plays out just like a murder mystery, and at any rate, Episode 2 is where shit starts to get weird. It's directed by David Lynch, which is always a treat. I really do enjoy a lot of the directors throughout Season 1 and 2 even, but there's no comparison to when David Lynch is behind the camera. The camera. So yes, this time I want you to join me, Anarchy, your host. Maidens and Magic is going to take you on a voyage. We're going to talk about this beautiful episode of Season 1, Episode 2 of Twin Peaks, the original run. And then we're going to talk about our maiden. You fell in love with her as Audrey Horne, the lovely Sheryl Lynn Finn. So after that, we're going to go into a exploration, if you will, of Tibetan Buddhism. I'm going to compare it to a couple other kinds of Buddhism. This promises to be an interesting episode. I assure you that. So here's what I want you to do. Just sit back, relax, leave it all to me. I got this. I got you. I'm here for it. This time, Maidens and Magic brings you Zen, or the skill to catch a killer. All right, witches, let's start out the maiden segment with a question. What are we going to do with little Miss Audrey Horne? Oh my, but she is delicious trouble. So much trouble. So much of it. And yet we're compelled to watch her because she's captivating and clever and cunning. And Audrey Horne gets her way. Still, back it up. I have to be like full disclosure here. Full disclosure. I'm really on the fence with Sheryl Lynn Finn as of like just a couple of days ago. I have graciously, politely ignored all the posting about God because, hey, you know what? To each their own. And it's not hurting anything. She's not preaching the hateful kind of religion, right? It's mostly just generalized, optimistic messages or hopeful little messages. That's fine. But a couple of days ago, she did post, I don't remember it word for word, but the gist of it was being forced to carrying a vaccination card was a violation of your, not only your civil liberties, but your personal sovereignty, or your basically your bodily autonomy. Oh, girl. Oh, girl, I wrote. I did. Wrote her back. This is not the loss of bodily autonomy that you should be, as a woman, should be concerned about. They're trying to control our bodies and our reproductive rights and our reproductive health. Oh, it's infuriating. However, it wasn't a direct, like, I haven't heard any anti vax rhetoric from her until now. I don't know really where this is coming from. This is kind of almost out of left field. It's the first I've heard of it. So I don't know. I'm trying to just kind of like, the jury's still out. I really don't want to have another episode like the Catherine Deneuve problem, which, by the way, you should go back and watch that one on my, it's also archived. I got in the, on my YouTube channel. So, yeah, you should definitely go check out the Catherine Deneuve problem because it's still frightfully relevant. At any rate, we're going to talk a little bit at pure about Miss Sheryl Lynn Finn. So Sheryl Lynn Finn actually was had kind of an interesting life. I'm going to go ahead and give some props out to her mother and father. She was born in Detroit, and she actually comes from a family of musicians. Her mother is a keyboard player, and her aunt. I did not know this, y'all. I did not know this somehow. Her aunt is singer Suzi Quatro. So her grandfather Art Quatro was actually a jazz musician, and her father Leo Finn managed rock bands. Suzi Quatro's the Pleasure Seekers and Alice Cooper, and a couple of other people that I hadn't heard of, but I just thought that was so cool. And I don't know how I haven't known that ever until now, but yeah, now I do. And so do you. See how we all benefit from this. So good. Also, if you were wondering, Finn is Italian and Hungarian on her mother's side, and Irish and French on her father's. So I think you can really kind of see all of that in just in her genetic makeup, I think. So concerning her work, honestly, other than Of Mice and Men and Boxing Helena, Twin Peaks really kind of was her biggest. Audrey Horne was she made it iconic. She really did. And I guess that just kind of like her rise, and for all of them, was really meteoric. I wasn't paying attention at the time, but watching interviews and stuff from the past. Anyway, it does look like so if you think about this, there was Twin Peaks was 90 to 91, and then there were a couple things after that. I think Boxing Helena was pretty soon after that, as I recall. Not too much further. But we're at 19. I'm looking at the Wikipedia page right now. Just also another moment of full disclosure. I don't think it's a big surprise that I use Wikipedia a lot at any rate. 96 to 98, career slowdown. So that all happened pretty quickly. She didn't even really sustain a full decade. Sheryl Lynn did make a couple of interesting statements about the career slowdown between 96 and 98. I kind of wanted to read those. They said, one says, I don't get considered for a lot of those big fat movies. The studios have their list of 5 actresses, and whether they're right or wrong for a role doesn't matter. It's how much money their last movie made. Not that I necessarily want to do them anyway, because there's very few that are big budget that have any substance or depth or any integrity. So, she did kind of, that implies to me that she did want to do work that was meaningful and was real, very aware of the fact that the game is rigged in Hollywood. It really is. It really is about who you know, and we could get very Mulholland Drive about that if you want to. We'll do that later, though. Um, but she said also, I was told once that I didn't play the Hollywood game, and that's why I wasn't a big star. So I kind of respect that she just didn't fully want to drink the Kool-Aid, really. She just fully didn't want to fully buy into it. There's something admirable about that. I will say of interest, she did date Johnny Depp and Prince, which it kind of fascinates me. I don't know why. Johnny Depp, not so much. But Prince, wow. I'm going to go ahead and give her huge props for that. Oh, what else? I will say that her filmography is much longer than I thought. She has done a lot more television and film than I had realized. But as the jury is still out on Little Miss Audrey Horne, I'm not going to spend too much time, more time on her. Suffice to say, again, she does an amazing job as Audrey Horne. I don't know about her political and or religious. Oh, fuck it. Let's face it, the two are synonymous anymore. I mean, really. Uh, yeah, I don't know. I don't know about some of the religious stuff that she's, or whatever that she's. I don't know if it's religious or political. I honestly don't, again, where is the line there? But I do not see her, I don't see her associated with any philanthropy or charity of any kind. So maybe I'm just missing it here. Maybe it's not on her, maybe it just hasn't found its way to her Wikipedia page. You'd think that somebody who talks about God a lot would be more charitable. I don't know, thoughts. But again, I might be judging, I might be putting a cart before a horse. And so, in the interest of being fair and doing due diligence, I'm going to wait it out. All right, so after this, we are going to get on to the magic portion of the show, and that is going to be about Tibetan Buddhism. All right, witches, this time I'm going to try something a little bit different, and I'm going to try to record the recap in real time as I'm watching it. We'll see how this goes. There will doubtlessly be a lot of pausing, and I will try to edit down so I don't ramble. I don't know that we need to hear about every single scene. However, there are a lot of scenes that I do want to discuss in detail. This is an amazing episode, and there are I think exactly 3 different firsts in this episode. The first time for 3 different things that turn out to be hugely significant. We're going to unveil those as we go along. It is season 1 and 2, I believe, are available to stream. I know they're on Hulu. Here's the thing, y'all. They don't include the Log Lady intros, which is just a devastating loss, in my opinion. I loved her so, and they set the tone for the entire episode, and it's really too bad to have to watch an episode without the Log Lady. It just makes me sad, especially now that she's passed on. So I'm going to do a little treat for you right here, right now. I'm going to do a dramatic reading of the Log Lady intro for you. This is the Log Lady intro from season 1, episode 2, also called Zen, or the Skill to Catch a Killer, directed by David Lynch himself. Sometimes ideas like men jump up and say, hello. They introduce themselves, these ideas, with words. Are they words? These ideas speak so strangely. All that we see in this world is based on someone's ideas. Some ideas are destructive, some are constructive. Some ideas can arrive in the form of a dream. I can say it again. Some ideas arrive in the form of a dream. All right, so we open up. The first scene is the Horn family dinner. This just looks like the worst. They just look so miserable. They're at this long banquet table. It's Benjamin Horn, Audrey, Johnny, the wife's name, who I always, Carol, I don't know her name. Um, and yeah, Johnny's got on a long cascading headdress, Native American headdress, and he's kind of cooing to himself, but they're just not speaking. They're not looking at each other. Everybody looks fucking miserable. Then in burst Jerry, fresh off the plane from Paris, and he's got the baguettes, and there's that infamous scene where Benjamin bites the middle of the baguette and starts talking with his mouth full about this reminds us of something down by the lake. It doesn't matter. He takes Jerry aside and tells him, hey, Leland's daughter was murdered, and the Norwegians pulled out of the deal. Jerry's depressed. Benjamin says, hey, you know what? I can cheer you up. Let's take a little trip across the border to One-Eyed Jack's. All right, so they get in the boat and they're headed to One-Eyed Jack's. And this is probably our first. This is another first, I believe. I'm not positive about this one, but I believe this is where we find out that Ben and Jerry do in fact own One-Eyed Jack's. And more sinister still, they are literally trafficking. They're trafficking women. No, I'm sorry. Not women, girls. High school girls. They're funneling them through Ben's department store, Horn's department store, through the perfume counter, straight into the brothel. So fun times there. Lots of good things happening. Basically, yeah. So that kind of ends there. And then this will unfold throughout the episode a little bit more. At any rate, the next scene over, we're seeing yet another incredibly uncomfortable dinner. James is with the Hayward family, and he and Donna are kind of being sweet with each other, I guess, and it's just so wholesome you kind of want to vomit, and I don't care much about it, to be quite honest. That's where I stand with that. Skipping some non-essential stuff about One-Eyed Jack's and James Hurley's forehead, I'm going to skip to the 11-minute mark where we finally see Agent Cooper, who walks into his hotel room. The phone rings. It's Hawk. Cooper inquires about Renette Polanski. Hawk says something like spirit and body are still far apart, something to that effect. And that verifies she did work at the perfume counter. Also mentions that he's seen a one-armed man around the hospital. A one-armed man? What? Cooper is clearly very interested in this, tells Hawk to post a full-time guard 24/7 in front of Renette Polanski's room, and then hangs up. There's a knock at the door. There's a note that smells of perfume that says Jack with one eye. This is clearly Audrey Horn trying to get his attention by helping him, and he knows that, but he's kind of playing along. He seems a little bit into it. All right, the next scene we get into is one of my favorites, and how you can really tell that David Lynch directed this episode. There's a very similar scene in Fire Walk with Me. Anyway, Bobby and Mike are going into the forest, into the woods to meet Leo for a drug deal. They're trying to get some coke, and it's that beautiful scene with the flashlights going through the branches, and they come upon Leo, who is not happy because they owe him $10,000. Well, where is that $10,000, you might wonder? Laura Palmer, of course, had it in a safety deposit box. Well, how did we know she was going to check out? Well, Laura was a pretty wild girl. Yeah, I know. Yeah, tell me about it. Maybe sometime I will. So Leo's like tough mugging it. He's mean mugging it. He's got a gun. He pulls out a shotgun. They're like, whoa, what's up with the gun? Who's this other dude in the background? What's going on? Let's be chill, whatever. He tells Bobby to go out for a pass. Bobby's like, what? What's happening? Like, go out for a... Oh, also, sorry, before this, Leo says that he realizes that his old lady's been giving it away in his own house. Bobby's like, oh, fuck, do you know who it is? Leo doesn't answer. So Bobby's shitting himself a little bit. Leo says go out for a pass, pulls the gun on them, and cocks it, throws the football, and they just start hauling ass, and we get to see the flashlight through the branches again. Flashlights through the branches again, and it's just a really cool scene. Leo somehow throws this perfect pass, like straight onto the hood of Bobby's car. Maybe Leo missed his calling, who knows? Anyway, they're like, get the fuck out of here. That was crazy. Mike's like, this is it, Bobby, no more. He's kind of a whiny bitch about it, to be honest. Okay, so we're briefly introduced to Big Ed Hurley, who runs the gas farm, and his wife Nadine, who has the eye patch. She basically, to bottom line it for you, she is obsessed with making a silent drape runner, whatever. The scene is just setting up a future plot point that, quite honestly, for me is tedious, but that's just my opinion. And then we go to a scene that you're like, okay, this has got my attention. What is happening? Because we're not really sure what is happening. We see the gang, as it were, Cooper, Andy, Lucy, Hawk, and Truman are in the woods, and it pans slowly across this like banquet table, stacked Twin Peaks style, just full of donuts. It's ridiculous. They're like 2 and 3 high, three deep and 7 across, or just an obscene amount of donuts happening right there. They are measuring from where Cooper is standing to a tree stump in the distance, and he's like, yep, that's it, exactly 60 feet and 6 inches. So I feel like that's relevant because Lynch definitely plays with numbers. In the first 2 seasons of Twin Peaks, everybody always meets at the Roadhouse at 9 o'clock. And I know 9 o'clock is a time when he meditates in the morning and evening. Anyway, that aside, so you're like, okay, you can see something written on the chalkboard that looks like nervous about meeting Jay tonight. And then there's a list of names there. And you're like, okay, what is happening? I'm curious. It definitely gets you. It flips back to an awkward scene between Bobby and Shelley Johnson, Leo Johnson's wife. She doesn't want to let him in because Leo has soap in a socked her and a way of hurting her with leaving minimal bruising. Fucking insidious. So she's got a huge bruise on her face. Bobby freaks out. And strangely, toxic masculinity. Oh my. And Bobby is seriously one of my favorite characters. I kind of feel like he's my alter ego in a stupid way. He grabs her face. What happened to you? With like grabbing the bruise and just is really rough and manhandling her. And it's really cringy. At any rate, then we go back to the Roadhouse, not the Roadhouse. We go to the Double R. For the first time, we see Big Ed and Norma, who runs the Double R meeting, and it's quite clear that they are at least smitten with one another, if not in love, which is the case. We go back out to the woods now. We're back out with the gang, and you're 100% invested. This is that charm of David Lynch, and another one of those moments where he so distinctly directed this episode, because it's just Cooper is telling them first. He wants to tell them about Tibet. Now, this is my first. Remember I said there were, I thought, exactly 3 firsts that would really. That were significant. This is the first mention of Tibet, the first of 3 within the first season, and it definitely is not a driving plot or like plot point, or like it doesn't really move the narrative forward, but it's a very interesting quirk that Cooper has where he's fascinated by Tibet and by this method that allegedly came to him in a dream. claims that it's a deductive tactic or technique that combines mind and body. And this is interesting. And this is, of course, how I launch into Tibetan magic, the magic for this show. But he has his Cooper's delivery. He's proposing this very, like, we're going to do this experiment that I kind of dreamed about. I kind of dreamed about it, no big whoop. And the team is fully, the buy-in here is incredible. Like, they're all in. There's this really adorable, it's one of my favorite scenes, I think in all of season 1 maybe, where on the blackboard where he has written nervous about meeting Jay and the list of names, on the other side of it there's a map, and he pulls out a pointer and he's like, let me tell you about Tibet, and he points to Tibet on the map with this old school wooden pointer, and all of the people at the same time, all of the audience leans forward, like, very earnestly, and it's very contemplative, and it's one of those things about the show that you really have to love, where you don't know how seriously the show is taking itself at any given point. At any rate, Cooper tells them a little bit about the plight of the Dalai Lama, which is something that comes up again in a couple of episodes. And then he proceeds to explain this method where he's going to stand there, and Hawk is, for some reasons I never understood, he tells Hawk to hold the bucket of stones, but he tells him to put on oven mittens. Are they hot somehow? I don't know how that would be. Anyway, it's funny because Hawk's standing there with oven mittens, holding a pail of stones, kind of looking perplexed. Andy's standing out by the tree stump with on this tree stump that is 60 feet and 6 inches away, they have placed a real old-timey glass milk bottle. I don't know how long ago those were used. The 50s maybe, I'm not sure. Who knows? I'm no historian. At any rate, Andy's standing there next to the stump with the milk bottle on it, and Cooper tells Sheriff Truman to call out each name on the list and briefly describe that person's relationship to Laura Palmer. So, through all the names, Josie Packard, nothing, Johnny, nothing, Cooper's throwing the stone with each name. He's not hitting the milk bottle. In some cases, he's not even coming close, although he does strike it after he reads Dr. Jacoby. You might remember Dr. Jacoby from the pilot. He's a little bit kooky. He's the guy with like the red and blue glasses. And anyway, he's a character. But then when he says Leo Johnson, Cooper throws the rock and the bottle smashes. In the next scene, we have what I consider to be the second of notable first for the series, and that is it's the first time we see Audrey Horne, or really anybody for that matter, dancing. This might seem like an odd observation, but many, as I'm sure you could well imagine, many people study David Lynch films. They're dissected. He never comments on anything, so we never know for sure, but the general consensus seems to be that dancing indicates, in Twin Peaks anyway, some kind of spiritual or emotional turmoil or conflict. A good example of this would be after Leland Palmer, or let's say the Leland Bob character, kills Laura Palmer, which, spoiler there, I don't think anybody would be watching this who hadn't already seen the series, but you never know. He dances. After he kills Laura, he dances incessantly. He's singing and dancing compulsively. It's very interesting. When we look at this regarding Audrey, interestingly, we don't see her dance very often. In fact, there might only be one other time until season 3, The Return. And when we finally have Audrey's dance in the Roadhouse, we, the viewers, are at that point, in my opinion, 100%. They're 100% aware of the fact that Audrey is living a delusion, a dream, a coma, perhaps different options there, depending on which one of the theories you follow more closely. Yeah, dancing is definitely a trope, if you will, within the Twin Peaks universe. In fact, later in the same episode, I had forgotten, but it happens, Leland kind of dances to Transylvania 65000 while this is a pretty notorious scene while he's holding the picture of his daughter and spinning around. And in real life, actually, while coming unhinged, somehow smashed the photo and cut his hand pretty badly. That was his real blood that he smeared all over the picture of Laura. I love little bits of trivia like that. Other things happen that I'm glossing over, and we do notably though are introduced to Albert Rosenfield. That goes swimmingly. He's a city slicker who does not suffer fools in a town of bumbling idiots, his words. So yeah, so we will be seeing plenty of Albert Rosenfield again. Fortunately, he is I can't say a delightful character, but a delightful character to watch. Okay, now we get to the good stuff. Now we're gonna get to in my opinion, the third official first time for things. We've been introduced to the Black Lodge, especially depending on which version of the pilot you watched, the European or the American. Met Bob, the one-armed man, and little Mike, or the man from another planet. However, this dream that he has sets up everything. I mean, it really is crucial. So many clues are in there, so many things that really propel the story forward. But what happens is Cooper goes to he's dreaming and he meets someone who looks like Laura Palmer. The long and short of it is, this is the dream that they share together. Lots of clues. Like I said, there's always music in the air. The birds sing a pretty song. I feel like her, but sometimes my arms bend back. So many there's just so many Peaks tropes here, so many clues and so many things, like I said, that just push the story forward. But at this point, it's baffling. It's bizarre. We really don't have much idea what's going on, except at some point, Laura Palmer gets up and whispers in Cooper's ear the name of the person that killed her. He calls Sheriff Truman and says, "I know who killed Laura Palmer. Meet me tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. Yes, it can wait, and the episode ends. I really find this scene so pivotal as it's played out again and again through Fire Walk with Me, through The Return. It takes us 25 years into the future. She is whispering into his ear that when Laura Palmer is whispering into Agent Cooper's ear, he's supposed to be 25 years older, which takes us to The Return. So it's this very complete story arc that I really appreciate. And then again, so many clues contained in this like 2-minute scene or 3-minute scene, whatever it is, maybe a bit longer, that we spend the entire into the second season solving a lot of these riddles that are clues that are laid out before us right now. So it seems to me to be a pretty important scene in the grand scheme of things. All right, coming at you now with the magical portion of the show. And I have to say, where I live, I walk my dog a lot, and there are several different Buddhist organizations and temples, and I think maybe not a monastery. There are several different Buddhist organizations in dog walking distance, and I happened to notice the other day that they're all Tibetan. So maybe Cooper is right. Maybe all roads do lead to Tibet somehow. I don't know, but at any rate, I'm going to talk to you about Tibetan Buddhism and talk to you a little bit about how it's different than the other forms of Buddhism that you may be familiar with, such as Mahayana or Theravada. First of all, let's just start at the beginning, because the beginning is, generally speaking, a good place to start. Buddhism was actually founded by the Siddhartha Gautama, and gosh, that was in, he was a prince actually in like the 6th century. And I think that's right. So about 2,500 years ago in India. And there are 470 million people who actually practice Buddhism around the world. I mean, it's actually a major player in the pantheon of world religions and doesn't get a lot of street cred. Really, where's the street cred for Buddhism? Come on, man. Probably because they're generally peaceful people who aren't out protesting things they have no business protesting. But is that here nor there? Neither? I don't know. I feel that it might be. But before I go too far down a tangent there, I am actually going to start with Theravada. Why is that, you might ask? Well, for a darned good reason. Darned good. It is the school of the elders. It is actually believed to be most commonly accepted that it is the oldest existing school of Buddhism. And there's some alchemy. I'm probably nowadays a lot of people are somewhat familiar with Theravadic medicine or diet, and it's definitely about the alchemy of plants and food, and that's a very vague general description because it's not something I've studied extensively because I don't really know how to cook or take care of myself. I'm a miserable adult. I'm just a very pathetic excuse for one. Don't bother trying to console me. All right, at any rate. I don't take care of myself very well. I try. My intentions are good. So Theravada was founded, as I said, by Gautama Buddha, or sometimes called Siddhartha Buddha, Siddhartha, pronounced differently depending. He founded Buddhism because he did it. He was able to like release all the attachment to things and escape the cycle of life and death and rebirth, and so he achieved nirvana, and so I have to say there is something, there's a slight Christ-like comparison, and by this I mean like the historical Christ. I'm not talking about the misappropriation or I'm not talking about the Christ that the pro-lifers claim are going to send all of us to hell, or is going to send all of us to hell. I'm talking about the historical Christ who was a healer and an enlightened person, and so was kind of revered as such, as savior. So from that, the thing about Theravada Buddhism is it's a lot more monastic, ascetic, doctrinal. There's a lot more to do with scripture there, which differs from sutras. Now, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but you've probably heard of sutras. In fact, I can promise you've heard of sutras because you've heard of the Kama Sutras. Don't say that you haven't. I know that you have. You're practicing them right now. And those are the tantric methods. Of course, if for some reason you've never heard of that, which I honestly can't imagine, but you never know. You never do know. Sutras in courting is now officially a word. Oh my God. Should I stop? I'm going to keep going. I was going to say sutras, actually, including tantric sutras, figure predominantly or figure into Mahayana and Tibetan Buddhism. And so I wanted to describe what a sutra was. I thought I would just give you the definition. I looked up the definition, and it says a rule or aphorism in Sanskrit literature, or a set on these in grammar or Hindu law or philosophy. Okay. And I was like, aphorism. I feel like I know what that is, but I'm going to look that up just to make sure, because I want to be able to I don't want to misuse a word. I'm like, aphorism. Oh, it's a pithy observation. Like there's another word, or is that pronounced pithy? I don't even know. That's not a word I've ever heard spoken, I have to say. But anyway, basically, It's just got increasingly obscure there. It contains a general truth such as, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I don't know how that's different than an adage. I don't know, or wives' tale, kind of. Anyway, at any rate, getting into Mahayana Buddhism. Mahayana is the most popular form of Buddhism practice today. I will get to the numbers somewhere, but I just know that off the top of my head, and is known accordingly as sometimes the large vehicle or the great vehicle. And it is really developed. It developed, of course, also in India. It is actually, okay, so how can I explain this? Well, I'm looking at the Wikipedia page right now, and I have been I was for Theravada too, just so you know. I'm not trying to say these are all totally my words, although you can tell which ones are because they're so eloquent. Basically, it accepts the main scriptures and teachings of early Buddhism, but also adds this is from Wikipedia, also adds various new doctrines and texts such as the Mahayana Sutras. The Mahayana Sutras say that they're a broad genre of Buddhist sutra scriptures that are accepted as canonical. And Chinese, preserved in the Chinese Buddhist canon, Tibetan Buddhist canon, and existent in Sanskrit manuscripts. So almost ubiquitous, really. Just that kind of spans all the Buddhisms and languages that we have there, pretty much. Well, no, not really. Doesn't touch Zen Buddhism. So there, I'm kind of exaggerating a wee bit, but I continue here to say that mainly the main divergence, in my opinion, is that of the Bodhisattva. This concept of Bodhisattva is not present in Theravada. And if Bodhisattva is really just any person who is on the path to Buddhahood. So Siddhartha became Buddha because he was able to, end the cycle of suffering and reincarnation. Sometimes bodhisattvas will reach enlightenment, but they'll choose to stay with humans to help other humans also reach enlightenment. And to me, that's a really cool aspect of, Buddhism in general. We see this a little more refined, slightly more refined, or so slightly more emphasis placed on this in Tibetan Buddhism, which is interesting because one could think of Agent Cooper as some kind of bodhisattva. Now, when we get to the return, we wonder if he's really helping, or is it just it could also just be hubris and he's just fucking things up even more, but that's a separate argument for another day. So suffice to say, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are central elements of Mahayana, which actually really has an interesting cosmology and cosmogony and theology. But they do see, I'm going to Wikipedia here, they do see various Buddhas and powerful Bodhisattvas residing in different worlds and different Buddha fields, which I just really love the whole concept of Buddha fields. But to get through this, one of the most important features of Mahayana is that it understands the nature of Buddha differently than Theravada. So it's a text that it kind of sees them as like transcendental and kind of superhuman. I guess here it says super mundane, and that's a fine word too. So that they have oftentimes strange powers and live for an exceptionally long time. I think it is even described, even here in Wikipedia, it describes them as living an unimaginably long time. Sometimes they're even omnipotent. They're kind of divine. I guess one is either divine or not. I think it's a halfway deal. But Buddha's life is described in detail. The longevity is described in detail in the White Lotus Sutras, which a lot of people have heard of. They're the most influential and predominant and kind of, I think they're the ones that people have heard of the most. They also tie in to Zen Buddhism. So that's another topic for another day. The Bodhisattva path, the Mahayana, I'm reading from directly from Wikipedia here. The Mahayana Bodhisattva path or vehicle is seen as being the superior spiritual path over and above the paths of those who seek solitary Buddhahood for their own sake. So it's much more of an altruistic feeling, this idea that you could stick around to help other people. I commend it. Just helping release people from their suffering and attain nirvana. I mean, I do that in my own chaotic good way, but or am I lawful evil? We'll never know. Anyway, so all of this really is, I could keep talking about, but I could talk about Mahayana for a bit longer, but I want to get to Tibetan Buddhism. So that was my goal in the first place. And I will say it is practiced more in the Himalayas and Central Asia and Siberian regions, even in Mongolia. It really did evolve as a form of Mahayana Buddhism stemming from the latest stages of Indian Buddhism. And it does still have some of the older elements too. But there is much more focus on the sutras, the Kama Sutra or Tantric sutras, and this idea of bodhisattvas. But I find it interesting that they're so, I used to always say back in the day when I was sleeping with a lot of women and my friends would ask me what I was going to do. I'm like, I'm going to be a good neighbor. I feel like I was just a very neighborly person. And I feel like there's an element of that to this. Like, maybe I'm a bodhisattva. No, I'm kidding. But no, really just this idea of like compassion for others, being connected to the physical and to the sexual, because sex magic is a thing. And it is another one of these magics that does span several different practices. It's inclusive of several different kinds of pagan and Wiccan beliefs, satanic beliefs, Luciferian, some, different. Anyway, it goes sex magic. It's a thing. So Tantra or Kama Sutras, Tantric or Kama Sutras are not something that I have practiced like literally by the book, but I have been a good neighbor. Bodhisattvas in the Kama Sutra. I will say that, remember I said that the idea of bodhisattvas where it was a little bit like refined or elevated in Tibetan Buddhism. I think I have not heard, it might be in Mahayana also, but it seems there's more of an emphasis on, in Tibetan Buddhism, on bodhisattvas being able or willing to assist all sentient creatures. So not just humans. There's something a little bit more, and it's hard, it's a kind of ineffable, but there's something a little more esoteric even about Tibetan Buddhism. Tibetan Buddhism has a lot more ritual and meditation involved. If you've ever seen Tibetan monks, you know that, or been to a Tibetan Buddhist ceremony or ritual or any prayer of any kind, or Tibetan singing bowls. Even there's the goal there with this. When I say a little more esoteric, a lot of that ritual and meditation is not just to rid yourself of attachments and other things, the meditation helps with within the scope of Buddhism, but there's more of a focus on emptiness, on things just being empty, of that being actually a preferable state. And I find that really interesting. Just as an aside, or that's not really kind of a long aside, but at any rate, there is a lot of tantric literature, a whole lot. Some of it I'm not going to go through all of it associated with Tibetan Buddhism. There is also, Kriya or Kriya Yoga, Shara Yoga, and Yoga Tantra. Something described as father tantras, which emphasize the illusory body. Mother tantras, which emphasize the developmental stage. I gotta learn to talk. And non-dual tantras, which balance the above elements. Now, this is interesting to me, especially because, and kudos to them, because you have, of course, embedded in this concept of yin-yang balance, male, female, but the non-dual tantras, tying that together and giving a balance between the male and the female, um, I really like that because it's not really as black and white, is it? Anyway, some of their esotericism is hard to say. Esotericism. At any rate, um, there is kind of a they try not to depend much on the material world. So if you've ever seen Tibetan monks, they do walk around with begging. They beg for their food, and of course, people are very generous and feed them well and give them money. But there is it. When I said, in other words, there was more asceticism in Theravada, I think I meant more that it was more doctrinal or scriptural. But a lot of people watching Tibetan monks would think they're incredibly ascetic. It's very self-depriving or denying, watching them sit in one spot without moving for hours, or how slowly they walk when they walk through the city streets begging. There's a lot of other ritual there. Some other things that you might be familiar with, like mandalas. Mandalas are those geometric configurations. It's like the symbols, they're circular usually, and they're in, here, I'll just read the thing. A mandala is a geometric configuration of symbols in various spiritual traditions. Mandalas may be employed for focusing attention, the attention of practitioners and adepts, and as a spiritual guidance tool, or for establishing a sacred space, and as an aid to meditation and trance. They're very cool. I like them a lot. And also mudras, which are certain hand gestures. There's also, which you've probably seen. Well, I'll tell you what. When Cheryl Palmer, yes, that's her name. When Laura Palmer in the Black Lodge, when she says "meanwhile" and does that hand gesture, that is a mudra. If you know, you know exactly what I'm talking about. They also believe in like divination, exorcism. They chant a lot. They have the Tibetan bowls, many different musical instruments, the throat singing. So there's a lot of ritual, almost, I dare say, more than Catholicism. It's very steeped in ritual. And they have cremation, funeral rituals, mortuary. There's a lot of it. There's a whole lot of ritual associated with it. And the mantras. We haven't really talked about mantras a lot yet. But basically mantras, I'll just read the definition here because sometimes that's easier. It's a sacred utterance. So a sound or syllable, a word, a phenome, a group of words in Sanskrit. Let me just break it down for you. I'll give you an example of a mantra. The Om. If you've ever Om chanted, you know what it does, especially if you're in a room full of people doing it. It connects you, other than finding a calming and some more centered place within yourself. It helps you find that, I think, within the universe. I really think it helps you tune into and tune yourself into or align yourself with the other frequencies around you, the other vibrations. And I know that sounds a little bit hokey, and it does to me when I say it out loud, but I know that when I'm experiencing that, Om, that's the truth for me. I can feel it. I can feel, I've always said, I have a thing for voices, and I've always said people operate on different frequencies, and some frequencies are compatible and some just aren't. But when you're oming, oming is probably not the right word for that. When you're chanting the Om, the mantra, you can really feel that. You can feel yourself, because you'll start adjusting your pitch and your tone so that it harmonizes with other people. Anyway, I think that's all I'm going to say about that for now. I want to end actually on one of the other things about Tibetan Buddhism that I think is very cool and definitely unique. There are women in Tibetan Buddhism. As you can imagine, just because of the way of the world, even within a religion as sublime as Buddhism, it's still the patriarchy. Wouldn't have necessarily called it ever outright misogyny, not a war on women as has been waged by Christianity. But, women were not traditionally accepted And now, really, what's happening there? Women in Tibetan society, it's a societal change as much as anything, I think. But they're having a greater amount of autonomy and power in their society, and so you can definitely see that reflected in Buddhism itself. What I will say is, women now take many different roles, from lay supporters to monastics to lamas and tantric practitioners. So I'm looking at the Wikipedia page now, because I was kind of looking to see what the statistics were on this, but I'm not really seeing any right here, and that's fine. I see one. There are nuns too, which are, the nuns would be the monasticism practiced by women, although it is less common. They are very, very respected in Tibetan society. And again, that coming down to some societal changes as well. And probably the tantric practicing of the tantric, yeah. But I mean, hey, if you find a woman who's well versed on the Kama Sutra, you're not going to take that. You're not going to respect her. Of course you are. Of course you are. I don't know if there could ever be a female Dalai Lama. I mean, it's a very interesting thought. Speaking of lamas in general, not the animals, the position. But it's a really cool thing. I think that is unusual, that is unique so far to the Tibetan practice. So girl power there. I'm not going to go into any of the history, and I'm also not going to go into the different schools, really. They do have several different schools. This is where it gets pretty complex. But I guess this time, I kind of wanted to do, instead of doing a deep dive on one, the comparisons. I kind of covered a lot of ground anyway, from the origin of Buddhism through, the oldest schools, through a lot of stuff with Mahayana, the Theravada Mahayana, to Tibetan Buddhism. We covered enough ground for now, I think. Anyway, I do hope that you've enjoyed this. I've enjoyed bringing it to you. My name is Anarchy. This is Maidens and Magick. I'm so thrilled that you've been down with me. Hey, heads up, I want to let you know, next week we are stepping away from the Twin Peaks David Lynch theme and into something I hope you've been waiting for. I've been excited about doing this at some point. I am going to do the original Suspiria, the Dario Argento Suspiria of 1977, that is replete with the goblins, the beautiful goblin soundtrack, which I'm going to try to sneak a little bit in, not to infringe on copyright laws, but gosh, you can hear a second of it. It's amazing. I also, at some point, really want to do the 2018 remix with Tilda Swinton. Don't know if I'll do those back to back, but they're both coming up. The 1977 version coming up next week. So you have that to look forward to. I have you to look forward to. I am, again, really thrilled that you joined me, and I hope that you come back again and again and again. Be a good neighbor, after all. And also, I don't know what's the other thing I say. Oh, please, until next time, stay witchy.
Some people think little girls should be seen and not heard.